The sun blazed low over the roofs of Juniper Ridge, casting long shadows across the dusty main street. Heat shimmered off the rooftops like a warning. A single rider emerged from the southern trail, coat flapping in the wind, boots coated in red earth. She rode tall and proud, straighter than any man in town, but there was a tightness in her jaw and a storm behind her dark eyes. Clara Dalton was back. People paused their work, watched from porches and store windows. A few muttered her name like a ghost had wandered in. They all remembered when she left, or rather, when her father sent her away to make a lady of herself. She'd gone quietly then, but the way she carried herself now, spine stiff, chin high, said she wasn't here for pleasantries. She pulled her horse to a stop in front of the Dalton estate. The house loomed atop the hill like it ruled the town, white paint cracked from too many summers. She tied off her reins, swallowed hard, and climbed the steps. The door opened before she could knock. Judge Harmon Dalton filled the frame, tall and grim in a waistcoat and string tie. His silver hair was combed back like slick judgment, and his eyes were steel. "You came," he said. "You sent for me," she answered. He stepped aside without a word. She entered, the cool air inside feeling like a trap shutting. The house smelled of wax and pride, every inch polished to reflect the man who owned it. Clara's boots clicked across the floor as they entered the sitting room. Harmon motioned for her to sit. She didn't. He poured himself a glass of bourbon, didn't offer her one. "You've been gone 3 years. 2 years, 11 months, and 6 days. He sipped, unbothered. "And what do you have to show for it?" A mouthful of dust and callous hands. Clara said nothing. Her hands were rough. It was true. She'd worked cattle in Colorado, mended fences, buried a sick boy who died on the trail. Things she never told him. He didn't ask. "I suppose you think you've proven something." His voice was as even as always, but there was a blade under it. "But woman's duty ain't a roam. It's to settle, to marry, build a home. You'll do just that." Clara's mouth went dry. "Who?" He poured another glass. Silas Creel. The name hit her like a blow. "No." His brows twitched, but his voice didn't rise. "It's done. The man owns half this valley. We've drawn up papers. You'll be well kept. You're selling me to a butcher, a provider. He beats his workers. He took land that wasn't his. He's powerful, and he wants you." Harmon set his glass down hard enough to crack the silence. "It's not a request." Clara shook her head. "I won't. I'll ride out tonight. You'll marry him by week's end." She stared, waiting for any sign of softness. There was none. His jaw was stone. His eyes, ice. "Why?" she whispered. "You hate him. You told me so once." He didn't flinch. "I hate a lot of men. Doesn't mean I won't do business with them." Clara turned, fists clenched at her sides. She wanted to scream, throw something, run until her horse collapsed. Instead, she walked out. She rode to the ridge overlooking the town, where wind cut to the canyons and the prairie opened wide, the place where memories lived. Years ago, she and Luke Calder had carved their names into the lone cedar tree that stood watch over the valley. She dismounted, fingers brushing over the bark. It was still there, C+L in a crooked heart. Luke had been the ranch hand with a crooked grin and callous fingers that played lullabies on a harmonica. He'd taught her to shoot, to ride bareback, to love in the spaces where no one was watching. Her father had found him in the barn one night and nearly put a bullet through him. Luke left that same morning, without a word. She pressed her forehead to the tree. "I ain't marrying him," she whispered. That night, she stayed in the guest house behind the estate. It was dark, moonless. Wind rattled the window panes. She didn't light a lamp, just stared into the shadows. A soft knock came at the door. She opened it to find her little brother, Tom, barely 13, clutching a folded scrap of paper in his palm. "He told me not to say nothing." "But I don't care," Tom said, handing it over. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. Inside, scrawled in Luke's handwriting, was a single line. "I'm coming back for you." She stared at it, heart thudding like hooves on dry earth. "How long ago?" she asked. Tom shrugged. He came through Old Crick 2 days ago. Jesse, the stable boy, saw him. Said he looked meaner than a dust storm. Clara folded the note tight and tucked it into her blouse. Her hands trembled. Does Pa know? Tom shook his head. If he did, Luke'd already be dead. Don't tell him. Not a word. Tom nodded solemnly. You gonna run? Clara looked toward the east, where the hills swallowed the trails. Somewhere out there, Luke was riding with fire behind him. She could feel it. No, she said. Not yet. The next day, preparations began. Seamstresses came to take her measurements. Servants bustled around the estate, whispering about silks and lace. Clara endured in silence, teeth clenched so tight her jaw ached. That evening, Creel came calling. He was as unpleasant as she remembered. Tall, slick-haired, snake-smiled. His suit was tailored, his boots polished, but his eyes were dead things. She barely nodded when he took her hand. He kissed it like he owned her. I reckon you'll come around to me, he said, voice oily. I've broken bigger broncos. Clara smiled, sharp as barbed wire. Try putting a saddle on me, Creel. See what happens. He laughed, too loud, then whispered into her ear, Your daddy sold you cheap, but I always did like a challenge. She pulled her hand back slowly, not out of fear, out of control. She could smell his stink, cigar smoke, old sweat, and something rotten underneath. When he left, she locked the door and counted her bullets. That night, sleep didn't come. Just the sound of her own breath and the wind outside. Near midnight, she heard it, hoofbeats in the distance. She sat up fast, peered through the window. There, down by the edge of town, a rider crossed the open field. No torch, no satellite, just a silhouette against the stars. He moved like he belonged nowhere, like the wind itself carried him. She felt something uncoil in her chest, a thread of hope, a dangerous, wild hope. She pressed a hand to her heart. Don't be too late, Luke. The wind howled louder, as if promising chaos. And Clara smiled into the dark. Something was coming. Something worse than Silas Creel. A man in love with nothing left to lose. Dust curled around his boots as Luke Calder stepped off his horse and into the heart of Juniper Ridge. The town hadn't changed much. Still two crooked streets flanked by saloons, shuttered shops, and watchful eyes peering from shaded porches. But Luke? He'd changed. He walked like a man carved from gunpowder and scars. His coat was torn, his beard rough, a silver harmonica hanging from a cord around his neck. The same one Clara had once stolen and kept under her pillow. He touched it absently now, as if it might still guide him back to her. No one greeted him, not out loud, but word traveled faster than a bullet in Juniper Ridge. Folks muttered his name under breath, spit in the dirt, or quietly shuffled indoors. Some remembered the boy with the slow drawl and quicker smile. Others remembered the shotgun Judge Dalton pressed against his ribs when he was run out of town. Luke headed straight for the saloon. The place stank of whiskey, cigar smoke, and dried-up dreams. A piano man played a half-hearted tune until he saw Luke and fumbled the keys. At the bar, Luke leaned over to the barkeep, a man with more jowls than teeth. Whiskey and news. The barkeep eyed him, uneasy. You stirring up ghosts, Calder. Ain't smart. Luke slid a coin across the counter. I didn't ride 500 miles for smart. The man poured a glass. She's still here. Clara. Been back a few days. Folks say she's to be married. Luke didn't blink. To who? Silas Creel. Luke exhaled slow. The name felt like biting metal. Guess I was right to bring the shotgun. He drained the whiskey in one go. Out the corner of his eye, two of Creel's men stood from their table. Big, dumb types. The kind that only fought in numbers and only when the odds were unfair. Luke turned before they reached him. Evening, boys, he said with a lopsided grin. The taller one sneered. Silas don't take kindly to you sniffing round his property. Luke cracked his neck. Clara's not a cow, and I ain't sniffing. I'm here to see what kind of rat she's being sold to. The first punch came fast. Luke ducked, jabbed his elbow into the man's gut, then spun and caught the second brute square in the throat. Chairs crashed. A bottle shattered. People screamed. It was over in seconds. The two men groaned on the floor. Luke stood over them, calm as sunrise, breathing slow. Sheriff Harlan stepped in through the batwing doors. His badge was tarnished, but his shotgun was clean. "Boys," he drawled, "I in the mess. You just had to bring the circus to town." Luke nodded at the groaning bodies. "Just stretching my knuckles." "You're going to get yourself buried if you keep poking Creel," Harlan muttered. "That man owns a judge. Owns half the town. I'm not here for the town." Harlan rubbed his chin, watching Luke closely. "She's not the same girl you left, Calder. Got steel in her now, but that steel's got chains around it." Luke holstered his weapon. "Then I'll break them." Harlan didn't smile, but he didn't stop him either. Clara heard the commotion before Tom came running into her room, breathless. "He's here." "Luke!" He busted up two of Creel's men at the saloon. Her heart skipped. She stood so fast the chair toppled. "Did Pa find out?" Tom shook his head. "No, but he's riding back soon." Clara grabbed her shawl. "Her boots!" "Where is he now?" Tom hesitated. "You sure this is a good idea?" She gave him a look that could split timber. She found Luke where she knew he'd be, at the cedar tree, their tree, under the stars. He always did like his peace under the sky. He turned before she spoke, like he'd known she was coming all along. Clara stopped 10 paces from him, hand shaking. She hadn't cried when her father made the deal. She hadn't cried when Creel touched her hand. But now, seeing Luke dusty and real, her throat caught fire. He stared at her like a starving man, seeing water. Neither moved for a long moment. Then she rushed into him. Arms, breath, heart, all tangled. His beard scratched her cheek, and his arms wrapped around her like he'd never let go again. They kissed like they were drowning. When they broke apart, breathless, she whispered, "You idiot! You came back. You didn't think I would? I thought they'd kill you if you did." Luke touched her face, thumb brushing the edge of her jaw. "Let him try." She laughed just once, and it sounded like home. They sat beneath the cedar, her head resting on his shoulder. "I'm to marry him in 4 days," she said. Luke's grip tightened. "Then we got 3 to burn the world down." She stared ahead, her voice low. "You don't know how bad he is, Luke. He doesn't just own land. He owns people. Men disappear on his payroll. Women, too. I've seen what's left of them when they come back. If they come back." "I don't care how big he is," Luke said. "I'll kill him if I have to." Her breath hitched. "They'll hang you." "Not if I shoot straight." She turned to him. "You don't have to save me. I've saved myself plenty." "I'm not here to save you," he said, eyes fierce. "I'm here to stand beside you while you do it." She touched his cheek, fingers trembling. "I dreamed you'd say something like that." They sat in silence for a while, wind rustling the grass. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled. But peace doesn't last in places like Juniper Ridge. Back in town, Creel heard the news. He didn't rage. He didn't pace. He simply leaned back in his leather chair, his boots on the desk, a cigar smoldering between his fingers. "Bring me his legs," he said to his men. "I want him crawling to the wedding." And they rode out into the night. By the time Clara returned to the estate, her dress torn from riding hard, Tom met her at the door. "Pa's back," he whispered. "He knows." Her stomach turned. She nodded. "Then I've got to move faster." The next night, she waited behind the stables. The moon was full, washing everything in pale silver. The wind was quiet. Even the coyotes held their breath. She saw him approaching, limping just slightly. His lip was cut. "Luke," she breathed. "They caught me off guard. Didn't last long." She took his face in her hands. "You have to leave. Not without you." She glanced behind him. "They'll be watching. If you're caught again, I'll take you tonight," he said. "Now, you don't owe this town anything." "I do," she said, voice trembling. "I owe it a reckoning." They embraced, desperate and quiet, his breath warm against her ear. "You still wearing the locket?" he asked. She nodded. "Every day." They stood there in the dark, hearts pressed close, knowing time was bleeding away. "I've got a plan," she whispered, "but I need 2 days. That's all you'll get." He kissed her once more, deep and slow, and then he disappeared into the shadows. She stood alone, watching the night swallow him, the wind tugging at her dress like a warning. A wedding was coming. So was war. The sun hadn't yet risen when the barn doors creaked open, and Clara slipped inside, holding her breath. It smelled of hay, sweat, and horses, a comforting scent, if not for the fresh streaks of blood on the floorboards. Luke sat slumped in the far stall, arms shackled behind a post, face bruised, one eye nearly swollen shut. A split in his lip still bled, sluggish and dark. He looked up as she approached, and even broken, even chained, he managed to smile. "Told you they'd have to drag me." She fell to her knees beside him. "What did they do to you?" "Just a love tap or two." His teeth were pink with blood. "Creel's men caught me near the creek. Thought they were sneaky. And you?" "Bit off one's ear. Got me a boot to the head in return." Clara pulled a flask from her coat and held it to his lips. "You shouldn't be here." "You told me to wait." "I waited." She touched his cheek, careful not to press the bruises. "I didn't think they'd catch you. I should have planned better." He tilted his head just enough to rest against her palm. "You planned perfect. I was the idiot who left tracks." Footsteps outside. She stood fast, slipped behind a stall wall, just as the barn door opened again. 2 guards walked through, rifles slung casually. One kicked a nearby bucket, muttering about coffee. Neither noticed the second pair of boots already in the shadows. They left minutes later, bored and none the wiser. Clara emerged and crouched beside Luke again. "They've moved the wedding," she said. "Sunrise tomorrow." He gave a soft, grim chuckle. "They really want to ruin a girl's morning." "I need time." "You don't have time." She leaned in close. "Then I'll make time." Later that morning, back in the house, Clara stood before the mirror, staring at the dress they had laid out. White silk, too clean for the world it was being dragged into. She didn't see a bride. She saw a funeral. Her own, with her jaw tight. She pulled a knife from beneath the floorboards, slit the hem for easier movement, then turned the sleeves into ragged cuffs. She braided her hair tight, tucking the locket beneath her collar. There would be no veil, no flowers, only fire. Meanwhile, Creel sat in his office, sipping brandy with his boots propped on the desk, a satisfied sneer carved across his face. His men had done their part. The boy was shackled, the girl cornered, and the deal sealed. He'd been waiting years to put a Dalton under his roof, and now he'd get the prize and the land in one move. A 2-for-1, like buying a mare and getting the saddle free. He didn't see Tom watching from the hallway, small and silent, face pale. Clara's little brother didn't know much about politics or power, but he knew one thing with perfect clarity. Luke Calder didn't deserve to be chained like a dog, and Clara didn't deserve to be owned. Tom ran, out back, in the shadow of the estate. He broke into the old storm shelter, where the Dalton family once kept their emergency supplies. There, wrapped in oilcloth and dust, lay what he needed, a revolver, long forgotten and still loaded. He stuffed it into his coat and slipped out, heart pounding like thunder. The day dragged on. The estate buzzed with activity. Servants fluttered. Florists came and went. A preacher was summoned, half drunk and confused. Creel's men strutted to the halls like they already owned the place. And beneath the celebration, chained in the barn, Luke's breath grew shallower. He hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days. His vision blurred, the world spinning like a drunken carousel. But he didn't call for help, didn't cry out, because he knew Clara was still free. And if she was free, so was he. As dusk fell, Clara crept through the servants' quarters, past the pantry and into the wine cellar. The passage was narrow, dark, lined with barrels. But behind the third rack, she pressed her hand to the wall, felt for the knot in the wood, and pushed. The panel creaked open. She'd found it when she was 12, an old bootlegging tunnel that led from the cellar to the barn, forgotten by nearly everyone, except her. She moved fast, boots silent against the earth. Luke's head snapped up as the floor beneath him shifted. Then her voice, sharp and low, "Move when I say." Not a second before. The boards gave way. Clara emerged like a ghost in a warpath. She knelt, picked the lock on his shackles, and pulled him to his feet. He stumbled once, caught himself. "You look awful," she said. "Good," he rasped. "I wanted to match the dress." She smiled, brief and fierce, then helped him down into the tunnel. They moved fast, crawling through dirt and cobwebs, hearts pounding. Behind them, the house above buzzed with final preparations. Creel toasted with Dalton. The preacher rehearsed his lines. Candles were lit. Clara and Luke emerged in the storm shelter, breathless. Tom was already there, waiting. He handed the revolver to Clara without a word. She kissed his forehead. "You're my favorite brother." "I'm your only brother." "Still counts." She turned to Luke. "Can you ride?" "I can bleed in the saddle." They didn't ride far, just enough to regroup. At the far edge of the old mill road, they holed up in a crumbling feed shack. Clara stitched up a cut on Luke's ribs by lantern light, while he bit down on his own belt. When she finished, she collapsed beside him, both of them covered in sweat and blood and dust. They lay together, barely speaking, the silence rich with unspoken promises. Then Luke whispered, "We could keep running." She turned her head. "You still think I'm running?" "No," he shook his head slowly. "Not anymore." She reached for his hand, fingers locking with his. "I'm not marrying him tomorrow," she said. "I'd hope not. I'm going to shoot him. On the altar, in front of everyone." Luke blinked, then smiled. "Now that's a wedding plan. I want him to see me coming. I want every man and woman who ever felt powerless in this town to know exactly why he died." Luke rolled over, grimacing from the pain, but chuckling anyway. "I knew I fell for a dangerous woman." "You fell for a stubborn girl in a cornfield," she whispered. But she grew teeth. The lantern flickered low. Outside, the wind picked up. Thunder grumbled over the hills. Tomorrow would be more than a wedding. It would be a reckoning. The morning broke with fire in the sky. Clouds tinged blood orange as if the heavens themselves braced for what was coming. Juniper Ridge stirred slowly, its people dressed in Sunday best though it wasn't Sunday. They came because they were told, because Judge Dalton sent word, because Silas Creel demanded it. The wedding was set to take place in the town chapel, a modest building with peeling paint and a steeple that leaned slightly east. A red carpet was laid across the aisle. Cheap roses looped along every pew, and a preacher stood nervously at the altar, dabbing sweat from his brow. He'd married widows and gamblers, thieves and debutantes, but he'd never stared down the barrel of a deal like this. Inside the dressing room, Clara stood before a cracked mirror. The gown fit. Of course it did. The corset was cinched so tight she could barely breathe. It was white as sin denied, stitched with lace that scratched her skin. She hated it, every inch, every layer, but the revolver nestled in the folds at her hip, that felt just right. Tom stood nearby, pale as milk. "You don't have to go through with this." "Yes, I do," she said softly. "For me, for Mama, for every girl this town ever tried to silence." Outside, a murmur ran through the crowd as Creel arrived, dressed like a prince, flanked by his men in black coats and silver spurs. He climbed the church steps like a man marching to a coronation. Inside, he adjusted his cufflinks and ran a hand through his oiled hair. "Where's the bride?" "On her way," someone answered. And she was... Clara walked down the aisle with no father beside her, no bouquet in hand. The chapel fell silent as she entered, the train of her gown whispering behind her like a warning. Her chin was high, her steps measured. She looked every bit the part they wanted her to play. But her eyes burned with something else entirely. Judge Dalton sat in the front pew, jaw locked, hands folded like stone. He didn't meet her gaze. Creel smirked as she took her place beside him. "Didn't think you'd make it, darling." "I wouldn't miss it," she said. The preacher cleared his throat and began the ceremony with trembling hands. Words floated through the air like ghosts. Holy matrimony, in the sight of God, the binding of two souls. Creel barely listened. He only stared at her, like a child about to unwrap a prize. Clara waited as the preacher recited the vows. Waited as Creel said, "I do," with smug satisfaction. Waited until the final moment. "And do you, Clara Dalton, take?" "No," she said. The word cut the air like a whip. The preacher blinked. I'm sorry." She turned to the crowd. Her voice rang clear. "I said no. I don't take this man. I never will." Gasps broke out. Chairs scraped. Creel's face twitched, slowly turning from confusion to rage. "What is this?" he snapped. "Some kind of joke?" Clara reached into her gown. The revolver came out slow, elegant, deadly. She turned it on Creel before he could move. The pews erupted in panic. Screams. Shouts. Someone yelled her name, but she never looked away from him. "You put your hands on people who couldn't fight back. You broke women like horses. You bought my father's silence with coin and cowardice." Her voice cracked, not from fear but fury. "You thought I'd stand still while you put a ring on my throat." Creel reached for his belt. She fired. The shot echoed like thunder in a canyon. Creel staggered, blood blooming from his shoulder as he dropped to one knee, howling. His gun clattered uselessly to the ground. People ran, shoved. The preacher dove for cover behind the pulpit. One of Creel's men went for his weapon, but before he could aim, a second gunshot rang out. Luke stood at the rear of the chapel, coat dusted, shirt bloodied, one arm hanging limp but the other steady with a revolver. "Thought you might need a +1, he said. Chaos broke loose. Creel's men drew. Luke fired again, then ducked behind a pew. Clara moved, weaving to the panicked crowd with her revolver raised, eyes sharp and hands sure. No more running. No more fear. Gunfire tore through the chapel, with splintered, stained glass shattered. Clara dropped one of Creel's guards with a shot to the leg. Luke took another in the side and fell to the floor with a grunt. Clara turned just as the last gunman grabbed the crying woman by the hair and pressed a gun to her head. Clara didn't hesitate. She fired once. The man dropped. Silence fell. Smoke curled in the air. Blood pooled on the church floor. Creel writhed, clutching his shoulder, teeth bare in agony. Clara walked toward him, each step ringing like a bell. He looked up at her, pale and shaking. "You'll hang for this." She pointed the gun at his face. "I should kill you." His breath came in short gasps. "Then do it." She paused. Then, slowly, she lowered the revolver. "I want you to live with it," she said. "I want you to wake every morning knowing a woman beat you. In your church. In your suit. On your wedding day." She turned away, heart thudding. Judge Dalton stood in the aisle, watching her, face blank. She met his eyes. "This is who you gave me to." He said nothing. "You never raised a daughter," she added, voice trembling. "You built a deal, and I broke it." Then she turned her back on him, walked through the broken church doors and into the light. Luke sat slumped against the post outside, pressing a torn cloth to his side. His grin, though pained, was still there. "You always had a way with vows." She knelt beside him, checking the wound. "You'll live. You promise." "I don't lie at altars." She helped him to his feet. Together, bloodied and breathless, they walked down the church steps as the townsfolk stared in stunned silence. Nobody tried to stop them. Not now. Not anymore. Tom was waiting with their horses, eyes wide and sparkling. Clara helped Luke into the saddle, then mounted her own. She looked back once, at the chapel, the crowd, the shattered past she just buried in gunpowder and flame. Then she turned toward the horizon. They rode into the open wild, into the fire-colored sky, two silhouettes against the dawn. And somewhere between the rising sun and the road ahead, Clara smiled. They called her handsome, but they'd never forget what else she was. Free. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, sometimes the fastest draw in the West isn't the one who fires first. It's the one who fires last.